637, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Appreciate you listening. There is a story that I want to do in the 7 o'clock hour at 7:35. I'm going to do the story about the death of 33-year-old Daniel Russell, who died during an attempted arrest in Henry County here in Tennessee. And his family is demanding, this is how the story goes, his family is demanding answers and accountability. And yes, they filed a civil rights lawsuit as well. And I'm going to do that story at 7:35 here on Nashville's Morning News with some amazing audio. And at 7:05, we are going to speak to our friend Jonathan Fahey about illegal immigration and a whole bunch of other issues. And that, again, is coming up at 7:05 here on Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Pete Hegseth, of course, knives are still out for Hegseth. And I got to tell you that, number one, I saw a story, and I touched on this yesterday, but I saw a headline where they said that Fox News would absolutely welcome Pete Hegseth back because his brand, even though some would argue that his brand is damaged because of his time in the Trump administration, I think most people who are Donald Trump supporters would tell you that his brand is not tarnished at all. As a matter of fact, you could say that Pete Hegseth, he is being targeted by folks on the left and people as well within the Department of Defense. Now, he is mired in yet another controversy this morning, yet another Signal app controversy. Now, we did talk about this yesterday as well. It seems to have reached fever pitch this morning.
According to two sources, we're learning that Hegseth used the Signal app on a personal computer in his office that was connected to the internet on an unsecured commercial line. What you mentioned is called a dirty line. And that was installed at Pete Hegseth's request so he could use the Signal app on his personal computer.
So I want to make sure I got this straight. So they're saying that he, and this is a quote, had the Signal app installed on his own personal computer and used a non-secure connection to the internet. I think I've got that right.
So why is this important? Well, a commercial internet line does not have the firewall protections that the Department of Defense's unclassified system has, so that makes it potentially susceptible to being monitored, particularly if sensitive information is being communicated.
You know, here's the thing, because I am so sick and tired of this story. Now, you know, and I've done all this before, but, you know, the Signal app, it was authorized to be used during the Biden administration for some communications, especially what's known as highly targeted government officials. I'm assuming that Hegseth would fall under that category. But this is where it gets interesting and also gets murky. Because remember, the accusation is that Hegseth used the Signal app on a personal computer with access to the internet, but not on a secured connection. But Signal has been used many times. I mean, it is common practice within the Pentagon and the Department of Defense to use Signal, especially during Biden's administration. So I want you to think about Hegseth coming into the Trump administration. He's setting up his office. He's behind his desk and he's getting set up with all the systems. And it is known. Everybody knows that Signal has been used in, you know, the Department of Defense and the Pentagon for multiple ways and reasons. They've been using Signal, different personnel, different situations. Signal has been used. And so it seems to me, and this is from Reuters, just listen to this. There is limited specific information about Signal's use on computers during the Biden administration. However, a 2023 Department of Defense memo noted that its restrictions on Signal did not apply to apps on traditional desktop operating systems, suggesting some flexibility for computer use. In other words, you know what this feels like? This feels like, find me the man and I'll find you the crime. If you've got somebody that you want to take down, then we'll create a scenario where it looks like he has committed a crime. They did that with Donald Trump. Now, I guess the question here is going to be about that unsecured internet connection. But I do feel like this is show me the man and I'll find you a crime. That's what it feels like. Now, remember yesterday when we talked about James O'Keefe and his undercover operation. Remember the guy's name? His name is Nicholas Terza, and he is a branch chief with the Department of Defense. Now, again, this is important. I shared this story with you yesterday.
We're going to resist him, everything he does.
James O'Keefe here in Arlington, Virginia, in front of the Pentagon. The branch chief inside the Pentagon saying on hidden camera he's going to resist against Trump and Hegseth.
So how do we know that? And by the way, you did hear that right. They're going to resist everything that Hegseth does, everything that Donald Trump does. So I believe that this falls under that. Resist, attack, set up. In other words, this whole thing just stinks.
There's another controversy over Pete Hegseth.
Yes.
The controversy, the headline on CBS News says, Hegseth orders makeup studio installed at the Pentagon.
What?
And after they do that, that captures your attention. After that, the story reads, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth recently ordered modifications to a room next to the Pentagon press briefing room to retrofit it with a makeup studio that can be used to prepare for television hits, of course, that he does. So then you run over to the New York Post, and Pete's firing back. He said that's, of course, fake news, that there's always been an area there, a green room there where people prepared for their TV hits. And all he did was to upgrade it with like a piece of wood installed against the wall so that people have a place to put down their stuff.
Wow.
And he also said, we should have installed tampon machines in every men's bathroom at DOD instead. The leftist news media would have loved that.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
But you see, Joan, that's what they do.
Yes, they do. And so that allowed for everyone to have a story about it, including our friend, who's the guy that we were making fun of yesterday that couldn't wait to, the comedian, Jimmy Kimmel.
Jimmy Kimmel, yes.
Jimmy Kimmel, of course, had to mock Pete Hegseth on his show. So that sort of opens the door for everyone to have their say about this story.
Right, because they don't give the proper context. They don't give the full story. They exaggerate. And that's this story with the communications.
Yeah.
And the Signal app on the personal computer on the unsecured line. Here's the thing. And thank you for bringing this up, Joan, because it proves my point.
Yeah.
Which is they're going to have these exaggerated stories about what Pete Hegseth is doing or has done or has not done. And then when you get the full story, you realize that it is exaggerated. You realize that Hegseth really hasn't done anything wrong. And then you realize he's got an entire Pentagon, an entire Department of Defense full of people that are resisting him, full of people that are attacking him, and full of people that are trying to set him up. I like that he's fighting back. 6:45, time to check the roads on WTN. Very much as far as your weather goes. Today, a high of 76 and thunderstorms. On Saturday, a high of 75 and scattered showers. And on Sunday, a high of 75 and partly sunny. On Super Talk 99.7, WTN, appreciate you listening. Talking about this accusation regarding the Signal app being placed on Pete Hegseth's personal computer on an unsecured line, internet line. Here's the other thing. Nobody is saying that he sent any kind of classified information on this line, just that it was set up. Here's the other thing that I would say. If he asked whoever sets up these kinds of lines at the White House to set it up, wouldn't they have told him that this is not allowed? Wouldn't they have told him that? And if they didn't tell him that, well, then why didn't they? If there is even any truth to this story. And also remember what Tom Cotton said, Senate Intel chairman back on Fox News when this whole thing started regarding Pete Hegseth and the Signal app. When he said this.
Many people in the intelligence community use Signal. They have communication all the time. Is that not correct?
Lawrence, that is correct. In fact, I bet a bunch of those senators that you see at the hearing today are using Signal as well to speak to each other or to speak to their aides. And it is my understanding that the Biden administration authorized Signal as a means of communication that was consistent with presidential record-keeping requirements for its administration, and that continued into the Trump administration. It's simply another messaging app like the iMessage app on your iPhone or email servers that every administration has set up, in which senior administration officials can communicate with each other.
Thank you, Tom Cotton. That's what I said. Signal is used all across the Pentagon and the Department of Defense and Department of Excess, yes, too. And and so, I don't know, to me, I'm having a hard time, Joan, with the hair on fire coverage of all of this.
Well, they did the same thing to President Trump, and they see blood or they smell blood in the water for Pete Hegseth. And so unbelievably, they see him as the weakest link. So that's what they'll go after right now, which I don't see Pete Hegseth as being weak at all.
You're right, Joan. I don't see him as weak at all. And, we've all been talking about, in fact, I think there's a story out there today where isn't Hegseth out there? And I didn't do the story. I don't have it planned for this morning. But I think that, number one, we know that recruitment is up under Hegseth. But number two, I think there's a story out there where he is quoted as saying that, we want our military to be fit, not fat, or something like that.
Yeah.
And, hashtag true. This is something that we need to do, is continue to build our military. And so now you've got the media who, as we have been saying, there is blood in the water on Hegseth, although it doesn't sound like Donald Trump is really paying much attention to all of the media hair on fire coverage of Pete Hegseth. This is Caroline Levitt.
The Secretary of Defense is doing a tremendous job, and he is bringing monumental change to the Pentagon. And there's a lot of people in this city who reject monumental change, and I think, frankly, that's why we've seen a smear campaign against the Secretary of Defense since the moment that President Trump announced his nomination before the United States Senate. Let me reiterate, the President stands strongly behind Secretary Hegseth and the change that he is bringing to the Pentagon, and the results that he's achieved thus far speak for themselves.
All right, so here's the story. Pete Hegseth targets physical fitness in military and slams fat troops. Speaking at the U.S. Army War College in Pennsylvania, Pete Hegseth reiterated his stance on military readiness with a fresh spin. During his speech to the audience, which included students, family, faculty, and staff, Hegseth, who renamed a U.S. military base Fort Bragg after Confederate generals, you can already tell this is a hit piece, emphasized the importance of troops being physically capable to perform necessary under fire, saying they need to be fit, not fat, sharp, not shabby, especially our leaders. I don't see any. Is that controversial? I don't see how that's controversial.
So, who is it here? The Irish Star. I don't know who that is. Hegseth makes bonkers vow to stop fat troops entering the army and demands they be sharp, not shabby.
Is
bonkers?
Bonkers? How is that bonkers?
Yeah.
You need to be fit, not flabby.
How dare he want athletically gifted people to be in our front lines?
That's exactly right. He's been very consistent about all of this, but I don't know. I think that the more that they go after Hegseth, the stronger he becomes. And I think the more that Trump can identify with Hegseth, because Pete is going through the very same thing that Donald Trump has gone through, which is just all of these attacks, this onslaught day in, day out. And I like that Hegseth is getting aggressive in fighting back. 6:51, Joan Jones has the news at 7.
President Trump and First Lady Melania are headed to Rome to attend Pope Francis's funeral tomorrow. We'll take a look at security preparations for that event. And that's coming up here at 7 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.